I'm Abdul Aziz. I am in my third year CSCB. So today I'm going to explain about first thing callbacks. So what are callbacks? Callbacks are nothing but they are the functions which are passed inside another function call. So for example, if we take here there is a function called greet. So greet is actually a function which is taking another function as an argument. So if we can see, I'm calling greet function here and I'm passing another function as an argument to this function call. So if you can see inside the greet function, it's taking a name and it's a callback function. The callback functions are those which are passed inside a function call. So we are calling a greet function here and we are passing a function as an argument. So after printing the hello world, it is actually calling the callback function. What does the callback function state here, which is say goodbye? It says console.log goodbye. Generally we use callback functions for uh, asynchronous calls. For example, uh, if there is a long running process, so after completing the process the callback function will fire up, so we will use for that. We can see that same example in fs. If you know fs library, uh, in fs library we have read file. So what does read file does? It takes a name of the file, some a.txt. It reads all the contents of the file. So whenever it reads all the contents of the file, which is a long running process, right? Reading a file is a long running process. So after reading that, this function will be called. What is it? This callback function will be called, which has error and data. So this got logs. So after reading the file, this callback function will be called. What does this do? It prints all the data of that file. So callback functions also work with the asynchronous functions. So uh, we know that JavaScript is a single threaded, so everything should be executed line by line, but these long running processes may take so much time and may block the code. So we use asynchronous functions for that. And for using asynchronous functions, we can use, to handle those functions, we can use these callback functions. Like whenever these functions get completed, do this thing. How is that thing assigned? This is due to these functions. So after completing the reading of this file, call this function. This can be worked like this and also like this, like passing it through and printing it and calling the function. This is about the callback function. You can see the async await and promises. So async await or promises or callbacks, these three can be used to handle asynchronous functions. So here we are using async and await. So this is mongoose.connect to a database URL. This is a long running process, so it takes so much of time, so we need to handle that. That's why we are using async and await here. We have first called the main function. Main is an asynchronous function, so it goes out of the call stack, and this process is going to execute outside, which is in the web APIs, which is done by the browser. So whenever this goes, we are using await here. This is actually a long running process, so we are awaiting that process to complete. So whenever this gets completed, which is connecting to the database completed, we are logging it, which is successfully connected. We can either use a promise also here. Like this is actually a long running process, right? This is going to return a promise. A promise has 3 states, which is resolved, rejected and pending. Whenever a long running process gets called, it gives a promise of state pending. So if we call this function, we can actually use async and await, or we can use promises as well. So to use promises, we can actually do something like this. We can actually do this dot then. So if we get some response, we will get some, if connection to the database was successful, we will get something like response. We can actually log that response that it's successfully connected. If there was any error in connecting to the database, we can catch that error and say that there was an error in connecting to the database. We can do it like this also, or we can use the traditional async await function. So we can actually create a promise in another way, something like const create promise, something like equals to new promise. This is going to take a callback function which has two variables, either resolve or reject. Both these are the functions. So I want to make this a long running process. I will keep a set timeout of 2000, which is 2 seconds. So this is a long running process. Whenever this long running process gets completed, I am going to resolve this. I'm going to call this resolve function. If I print this, I will get a pending state. After 2 seconds, I will get this as resolved. So if I reject here, if I actually reject here, if I write the reject here, if I call the reject function here, it gets rejected, and we will go into the catch block that it got rejected. That's it. This is about async await and promises. This is it. So this is actually an asynchronous function. So here you can see I'm actually updating the user here, user.findById.populate. Okay, I'm actually populating here, and I'm actually populating here. It's a MongoDB thing. So I'm actually finding the ID and populating this thing. So it's actually a long running process. That's why I'm awaiting here. What does this do? It actually stops the execution here. So whenever you come, so first this is going to be executed, then only the remaining part will get executed, right? So async await works like this. Generally, whenever you call this function, it is an asynchronous function. So it goes to where? It goes to the web APIs thing, and it processes all the things, and after that it goes to the queue, and when the event loop occurs, it should run. But what happens here is, as the down won't run like until this is completed, because we are awaiting here. So this is how it happens, and we have completed the async await also. Now let's go to to-dos. Okay, let's go to closure first of all. What is a closure? The inner functions will have access to the outer functions variable. So the inner functions will have access to three kinds. One is global variables. They have access to global variables. Second thing, they have access to the parent functions variables. Third thing, they have access to the current functions variables. So there are three things. So if you do, okay, so this is the counter function, and I'm calling the counter function. So the execution point goes here. So there is count plus plus. So where does this count variable come from? It comes from the parents variable, which is count. It comes from the parent scope, which is count. So count plus plus, so it goes to 1. Next time count plus plus goes to 2. Next time count plus plus goes to 3. So if we do node closure.js, we have the count 1 2 3 1 2 and 3. So if we go to to app, like I have said, this let to do equals to this is the parents variable, parents array, right? Parents variable array, and all these are the functions: add to do, remove to do, show to do. All these are the functions, and I'm actually returning all those functions. And this is a private PA. This is actually private variable. So if you look at it, we are not passing this private variable, we are not returning the private variable, we are just returning the functions. We are just returning the functions which can change the private variable. So whenever we call the create to do, this gets called and these three functions will be returned. So with these three functions, so it is going to return an object of functions, right? So to do app is an object which contains these three functions. So if you do to do app dot add to do learn JavaScript, so if you do add to do is taking something as string, it is taking a string, and if there is a string, so if you are actually sending something, then it's checking whether it's undefined or not. So if it's undefined, no, don't push into it, don't do that. So if it's not undefined, then push it to the task, push the task into the to-dos, and console.log the task is added. If it's, you can say, undefined, something like that, then you don't need to push that, you just say to user that it's undefined. Remove to do, how does this work? You have to remove based on the index, you have to send the index, and whenever the index is greater than or equals to 0 and it is less than the length, so what you need to do is to do's of index, you have to remove that. So whenever there is whenever the index is greater than or equals to 0 or it is less than the length, then only you have to remove that, then only you have to do remove to do's of index. So how am I removing that? I'm just using a splice based on index, like I'm removing that based on the splice. So show to do's is nothing but printing all the to do's. So whenever, if to do's dot length is equals to 0, you should not do anything, right? No tasks in the to do list. If the to do's dot length is equals to 0, if it is not, then you have to print all the to do's. How do you print them? Console.log to do's list for each task comma I, you have to print, like I have taken for the numbers, so you have to do I+1 and task, you have to print all this stuff. I have used it like this. So after doing this to do app dot add to do learn JavaScript, then after doing that add to do, I'm building a project, and after that we have to do show to do's function. Here we are taking an index, so we are removing the to do at the specific index. So if we are first checking if the index is in the range of 0 to the to do's length, and we are removing based on the splice method. What does splice method does? It takes an index, and this is the index we want to remove, and number of elements, which is we want to remove only one element from this index, so we are removing that, and it updates the to do's. If the range is not in between 0 to length, we are telling it's invalid index. That's it, that's how it works. And add to do, I'm adding this to do's, show to do's, and removing the 0th index, which is this one, and I'm again doing show to do's. So if I run to do's.js, you can see these two are added, the first one removed, and after show to do's build a project. This is it.